Hi students, welcome to Module 7, and this week we continue the conversation talking about interpreting and translations for the educational field. In the previous module, we went over some of the laws, state and federal laws pertaining to the rights of families and students that are limited English proficient, and what are some of the laws, especially in the K-12 area, when it comes to making available materials and also interpreters for families and students. So this week we continue the conversation on what are some opportunities for interpreters within the educational district with school districts. Also, where do you find the special education glossary? What is an IEP? And then you're going to have your first written translation from Spanish to English, and we'll go over the discussion. So please, on your own time, make sure that you watch this video. This video is going to explain to you, this is one of the best videos that I have found, what is an IEP and what is a 504 plan. So if you're already working in a school district, you're probably already have some experience if you are interpreting or translating, or have been asked to interpret and translate. An IEP is an individualized educational plan for students that have a special or in the special education program. And here it will tell you what disabilities fall under an IEP. Also in the module, in the resources, you're going to have that, but I want you to know that a 504 plan is also for students with certain disabilities, identified disabilities, but it's not the same as an IEP. The majority of the educational interpreters that work in school districts do translate IEPs, because if a parent or a family is limited English proficient, by law, the special education needs to make sure that the parent and the student understand everything that is being reviewed in an IEP. So for that purpose, I included parts of a translation, very briefly, just what would be a script for an IEP, so that you can continue to review on your own time what are some of the terminology that is related. I also posted there free resources for you to look at some forms. The only bad thing is that the forms that are out there have been translated with Google, and Google just barely in the last year and a half has improved, but Google has tremendous mistakes from the last decade on. If again, I'm all for you using digital tools, but you need to make sure always to prove. So I've included in the resources for you to see some, also some forms there and the terminology. So what do interpreters and translators do if they are working in a school district where there are IEPs? So IEPs take place in the school district for students that are in middle school, for students that are in high school. And there's just a meeting between the special education teacher, it could be the psychologist, the principal has to be present in the meeting, the teacher, and then not all, because really it's a lot, what the interpreter does and sits in that meeting and only interprets in first person. You don't interpret like, oh, the mother said this. No. You interpret in first person. Every time somebody says something, you're going to interpret in first person. So I give you an example there. So it is, again, it's a plan developed to ensure that the child who is identified with a disability that is attending elementary or middle or high school receives a specialized instruction and related services. Once it gets to the high school, they do more testing, but you do not need to worry about that. That is done by the special education department, by the teacher, by psychologists. All you need to do is interpret and translate. The forms usually are already translated by most of the districts, but you do need to input new information if you were to be the translator or the interpreter during that a specialized meeting. Very important, if you're considering going into the education field, please make sure that you go to the glossary section and you download the Spanish glossary for special education, because there's no point in you reinventing the wheel or looking at, going and searching and Googling words that are to be included in special education interpretation or translations, because the majority of the schools have used this glossary from the that was created at the national level, so that if all the forms are uniform. So make sure that you, if you are already working education or are considering working education, that you download this form, and it's also going to be part of a quiz in upcoming modules, because I ask you specifically go to this glossary and tell me what is the definition in English or Spanish of such word. And believe it or not, even though I reference and I tell students and I direct them to go and look at this glossary, students get the wrong answer because they go online and they Google it. And we do not want just any word. We want the word that it's already approved and it's a uniformly used by school districts and also in the special education. Again, you could see the different forms that are used. If don't spend too much time here, unless you're considering going into education, then do spend some time to get familiarize yourself here in the different levels of different forms that are related. There's many forms. It's a very complex process, but those forms are used over and over, the repetitious. So don't feel overwhelmed. Again, this is just so that you could see the many forms that are available. This is the special education. Every county has a special education unit called CELPA. And then they're the ones that coordinate with all the school districts in their county, everything that has to do with special education. So when you look at the script that it's a sample script for an IEP, what would it look like? I want you to compare the English script with the Spanish, the translation. Would you have translated it that way? So make sure you're looking at the syntax very formal. And the glossary was used, the one that I mentioned from the special education, for all of that terminology. You could, if you are considering going in the field of education, there's no submission for this. I provide you with the sample script. But if you are, then make sure you look at the script and then you try to translate it, and make sure you continue with the subject verb agreement. Do not translate or interpret one question in informal, remember the McDonald's, okay? Remember the McDonald's ad. Do not translate or interpret one sentence in usted or tú and then switch to formal. It has to be entire formally using usted, subject verb agreement. And then the special education, again, the glossary was used for that particular script. For your assignment this week, and please pay attention to this, because every time students get it wrong, because I know they didn't listen to the video lecture, and I will deduct points. So what are some of the most common mistakes? This is a true story. One of my clients contacted me many years ago and shared with me a letter that this parent was very upset about, and sent me this letter so I could translate, so that the teachers and those involved could know what this parent was saying in Spanish to translate to English. True story. This is a charter school. This was an incident of a student that kept bullying kids, being very racist in school, calling them beaners. This is a charter elementary school. So again, I was asked to translate. So here you need to note that Spanish are very Latinos. We use a lot of superlatives, right? Mijito, por medio de la presente, and we use just words were very emotional, right? Estoy muy molesta, and so very informal tone that this parent used, very upset. So do not use a literal translation. So in Spanish is very common in many Latin American countries, especially in Mexico, for some people to say por medio de la presente. Okay, that's how they start a letter. But Google has improved now that they have Gemini, but Google Translate was horrendous. And my students used to get at least 4 or 5 words that were wrong because they would use Google Translate. Do not say, because if you do a literal translation, right, it has nothing to do with a GIF right? So has nothing to do with a gift. This is a letter. So please make sure that you know the difference between complain and complaint with a T. So make sure you use the correct translation when you translate in English, because it's not the same. A complaint versus a complaint with a T. So do your due diligence. Okay, so you need to stay close to the meaning of the letter. Do not add anything else in English. I have many years with this. I continue to use this letter from the parent, and for the past 5 years, I've seen the same mistakes over and over from students. Do not add words. Okay, you just need to translate what's in the letter, and then also half of the students do not translate principle correctly. Okay, you need to know the school principal. What is a school principal called in Spanish? Okay, and again, do not add words. Do not translate presente as a gift. Por medio de la presente. So make sure that you do this here in the reflection. You know, are you just going to copy paste it and put it in AI and tell it to give it to you and then submit it? Because believe me, I know students use AI and they don't do due diligence, because I have 5 or 6 or 7 that are exactly the same. Exactly. And it's just, we're humans. We're not going to submit the exact same translation. So that's how I know that my students, and there's nothing wrong with using it if you're going to learn to do it first from scratch, and then you might run it through AI to correct it. So here is some points, a thinking point. What is it you're going to do? Are you going to ask first AI to do it for you? That would be a disservice. Or you're going to translate from scratch and try it, and then remember that I give you the correction key, and then you can do that reference cross-check. Are you going to pay attention to syntax and make sure that it's a very formal en usted? All the translations are en usted, using the correct subject-verb agreement. Tienen que conjugar los verbos correctamente porque es una carta formal. Okay? So here, again, what is it? How are you going to tackle this? I already told you here what are the biggest mistakes. They do not translate principle correctly. Okay? They do not start the letter correctly. So make sure that here you, and also another thing is very common for those Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers. And I already went in the review of the most common mistakes in module 2. My Spanish speakers, they struggle, and I will mark it wrong. The in versus on, okay? Very common to get that wrong. So here for the discussion, this is a discussion that went viral. This particular radio station had a child called in during COVID. And I even tell you here what minute to go and look for it. So you go to minute 1.06. You can fast forward the audio, because I have students that are like, I'm not understanding. What am I supposed to do? So read the instruction, please. You can forward it. 1.06, the child calls in, and then she becomes an official translator for her parents. But she does literal translation. This is only a 10-year-old. How is she supposed to know syntax, or what does it mean when somebody asks, what's on your head? What's on your mind, right? And she translates. So anyways, make sure that you hear this, okay? Because she asked the parent literally, like, what's on your head, instead of what are you thinking, right? Because it says, what's on your mind is another word of saying, what are you thinking? But this child does not comprehend at 10 years old. So that went viral. A lot of viral comments in what used to be called Twitter. Okay. So here, please make sure, again, that you're posting 2 replies. You're going to fail the discussion if you have an amazing post. I love your post, and then I come to grade, and then you don't have 2 replies, so you're only getting half points. That's an F. So make sure that you come by the end of the Sunday or by the end of the week and write your 2 replies. And remember, the modules open every Monday, and I would go and check the audio for reminders. Sometimes I remind you, hey, you have a quiz due at the end of this module. So make sure that For example, here in Module 4, in my announcement, you're going to hear, hey, alert, you have your study guide. Start downloading this study guide for Module 5, right? Because you're going to have a quiz for Module 5. So just make sure that you're on top of, the schedule and the deadlines. Have a great week.